Hi guys, this is the last lecture in our biopsychology unit, and tonight we'll be looking at the two different hemispheres of the brain, or specifically in people who suffer from split brain syndrome. So we said in the last lecture, the first two slides will be review, that we have two hemispheres to our brains, our left and our right brains. So this process by which our brain works with both hemispheres at the same time or simultaneously, it's called lateralization. Now, while both hemispheres work together, they serve some very different functions. So how do we know about these functions? Well, like most things, it had to do with people damaging certain parts of their brains. And when we studied them, certain things were revealed about the left hemisphere in particular. So brain scans and split brain studies, these people who only have access to one side of their brains, show more about the functions of the two hemispheres and how they coordinate with one another. So we know about these two hemispheres basically from people who have damaged their use of both of them at the same time. So just to sum up again, this is how our brain would function if it has, how our brain does function when it has two functioning hemispheres. The left hemisphere has to do with thoughts, logic, details in particular, language, it's linear and literal, very logical, calculation, math and stuff like that, pieces and details. Whereas the right hemisphere has to do more with feelings, intuition, kind of instinct, unspoken type things, the big picture, so like all encompassing ideas, thinking in wholes rather than parts. So the more subtler aspects of language, such as tone, inflection, context, associations, inferences, which is when we can sort of gain the meaning of something, perception, and like I said, wholes. Also included in that is ourself. So we think of ourself as a whole rather than if we use the left side and think of ourselves in one specific term. So as I mentioned, there are these split brain studies, and that's a real brain like right there. Looks like cauliflower, and maybe that's why I don't really like cauliflower too much. So the split brain studies is when someone severs or needs their brain severed in half along this corpus callosum. So when they cut this corpus callosum, which again is the band of axons that connects the two hemispheres, people only have access to either one or the other side of their brains at the same time. So researchers have studied these patients who have had to have their corpus callosums cut for whatever reason, and it is revealed different functions of each hemisphere by having them isolated. So in this diagram you see how each side of the brain processes information. So it's a little difficult to understand, but the left side, your left eye, for example, is processed by your right brain. In the same way your right eye is processed by your left brain. So what does that mean? So for example, certain things exist on one side or the other. Most things, such as the motor cortex, exist on both sides, but for example, speech exists primarily on the left side. So again, each hemisphere does not perceive what each eye sees. Instead, it perceives the half of the view in front of you that goes with the half of the body that is controlled by that hemisphere. So again, right eye, left side of the brain, left eye, right side of the brain. So if we look at what's going on here, this kind of explains what's going on. This guy looks at this dot. He sees the word heart separated by a line and the dot in the middle. So as you can see, his right eye is looking at these two letters, H-E, and his left eye is looking at these three letters, A-R-T. So if you ask him, what word did you see? He's responding with speech. So he's accessing the left side of his brain. So if you ask him, what word did you see? And he speaks the answer, he will say art. because that left side of the brain, that left eye, saw what was on the right side of the screen, and this is associated with language. Or if you told him to merely indicate which word you saw with your hand rather than speaking it, he would most likely say that he saw the word he, because that has to do with his right eye. Therefore, that had to do with his left eye, which has functions on the right side of his brain. So he does not have access to his linguistic capacities, only his motor skills. So that's a little demonstration of how this works. So there are these studies done, as I said, with these people who only have access to one side of their brain. So there are certain people who are able to sort of consciously have each side of the brain do something specifically. So for example, Leonardo da Vinci, he could take a piece of paper and write with both hands in a mirror image. So he would start here and write the same thing with both hands, or have one hand doing one thing and the one doing the other. This is an example of having a divided brain and using them differently. So with his right hand, he was probably doing stuff with his left brain, and with his left hand, he was doing stuff with his right brain. So people are able to follow two instructions and draw two different shapes simultaneously. So it's almost like we have two brains. However, the drawback would be that people can get frustrated that hands do the different things. And this is a condition that certain people suffer from, where it's kind of like the left hand doesn't know what the right's doing. You ever hear that saying? Well, this is true for some people. So the thing to take away for this lesson is that our brain has two hemispheres, two different functions, and it is controlled by basically the opposite side. Alright, so that concludes our unit. Study up. We're going to do some review in class. Hopefully we'll all nail this test on Thursday. Take care, guys.